Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in for another video. Supatease here, and today we're going to be going over the Venthyr Covenant for Balance Druids. The strengths, the weaknesses, the pros, the cons, why should you pick it, why shouldn't you pick it, basically everything you need to know. So in Shadowlands, you're going to have to pick a Covenant, and Venthyr is one of the options. You're going to get one Covenant specific spell and then one class specific spell associated to each Covenant. So the Covenant spell, which all classes will get, will be the Door of Shadows. 35-yard range, 1.5 minute cooldown, teleport. So you'll be able to decide where you want to go with the green circle on the ground, and then you can just kind of go. Right now I'm currently talented into having it be instant cast, but it is not baseline as an instant cast, so do note that as a sort of a downside to it. The other class specific ability you'll be getting for the Covenant Venthyr is Ravenous Frenzy. This is an ability that's very similar to an artifact weapon trait for Balance Druid back in Legion, where you would get stacks of haste every time you casted a spell. But this one's a little bit more deadly than that. It's got a downside to it. So when you activate it for 20 seconds, every spell that you cast will increase the damage and healing and haste that you have by 2%. But if you spend 1.5 seconds not casting an ability, the frenzy will overcome you and consume 3% of your health per stack, stunning you for 1 second and ending. So if an enemy team is kind of smart about this and they see you activate Ravenous Frenzy, now as a Balance Druid, you know, it's classic to just spam Moonfire, right? So you could be stacking this up pretty rapidly. But if the enemy team knows that you're stacking it, waits until you hit some pretty high stacks, and then crowd controls you to stop you from casting spells, which will cause you to be idle, you're going to take a ton of damage in return. Now in PvE, the boss is not necessarily going to be out to get you, right? So you're going to be planning this spell around a mechanic of a trash mob or a boss so that you're not getting crowd controlled. But a player will look for this and try and exploit it. This is one of the strongest spec-specific abilities or class-specific abilities from the Covenant so far that I've seen in terms of damage output. If you were to get this off with an incarnation, it lines up beautifully, both being 3-minute cooldowns as a combo. You're going to be casting very fast towards the end of it, but again, the downside is that if you are going to get crowd controlled, you're going to take a ton of damage in return. And this is why I was saying in the other videos for Venthyr, in terms of PvE, they seem to be very powerful. I could see this being one of the best overall for dungeons and raids. So if you're interested in parsing or getting really just high logs or high keys, I think it makes sense for the Venthyr to be a solid option for you overall. And in PvP, it can also, usually mobility is pretty desirable. The only downside is that melee classes generally will hit you if they want to hit you. They just have an overabundance of mobility, so even if you get access to the Door of Shadows, there's still a good chance that a lot of melee classes will be able to continue to hit you, but you do get it as a bonus in terms of some extra utility. Now we're going to be looking at the 3 talent trees for the Venthyr. The first talent tree is going to be Nadja, the Mistblade. This is one of the ones where you look at it from a PvP player standpoint, and you're like, this is absurd. This is absolutely insane, the types of bonuses that you're going to get from this talent tree. And right off the bat, when you look at it, the Agent of Chaos, Door of Shadows disorients all nearby enemies at the target location for 8 seconds when you appear. So it basically turns Door of Shadows into a skill shot crowd control. You kind of got like a disorient bomb, but remember, I'm currently talented into making it instant cast. It's not normally instant cast, so the enemy team will have time to react to you. You'd want to lead this with a different crowd control, but it still is quite powerful. I could see this in hunter compositions that play with priests, so hunter rogue, feral hunter, these types of composition, where the healer generally has a hard time getting your healer as the hunter team. the priest has a hard time getting to the enemy team's healer. So Door of Shadows just immediately gets you there, and it lands you an 8-second crowd control, which is 2 seconds longer than your fear. So it would be better than a Psychic Scream. However, it should be the same diminishing return. So you're not going to get this disorient into a Psychic Scream. We also don't know if this will remove damage over time effects. So if an enemy healer is dotted and taking damage over time, and you jump to disorient them, and this does not clear those damage over time effects, disorients generally break on damage. So there's a good chance that this crowd control will also break. This is why I also think that it's only really good for teams that generally are trying to focus crowd control on the healer and attacking another target. If you're playing a warlock and you're attacking everyone, it may be kind of pointless to get this. It's the same diminishing return as your fear, and then the same thing goes for Balance Druid, right? It's the same diminishing return as your Cyclone. While it's on a different school of magic, you get that as an advantage. You could jump onto the enemy team, and if you, let's say you miss it, they're able to move away from it. You're still in position now to land a Cyclone. It's quite aggressive, and that's sort of what this entire Covenant is about, is just output and aggression. The other option is going to be Door of Shadows, increases your movement speed by 80%, decaying over 6 seconds. Again, movement speed is not typically a problem for a Balance Druid, so when you're looking at this, you want to probably prioritize the crowd control that's on a different school of magic. So if you're going for Cyclones and you're interrupted, you could then go for a Door of Shadows instead and get an 8-second crowd control. The next one here is just going to be, you loot 20% more infused rubies and dredgers throughout Rivendreth, offering an expanded section of goods. Kind of just no consequence there. It's just an added bonus. The conduit's still not available, so we won't be able to look at these just yet in terms of their output. So it's just looking strictly at the covenants. Exacting preparation. The benefits of well-fed flask and weapon enchant effects are increased by 15%. So well-fed and flask don't matter to you in rated PvP content because you can't get them. Weapon enchant effects, though, will. And I haven't looked directly into what types of weapon effects there are for Shadowlands, or if they're even available. If we were to just apply this logic to the Battle for Azeroth one, where you're going for Torrent of Elements for 10% more damage, it's not that much of an increase overall. And if you're a PvE player, though, this is really good for you, right? You're going to get extra benefit on 3 different sources of increased damage, so it makes a lot of sense that this would be a solid pick. And this is why I was saying that the Venthyr seemed to be a little bit more focused on output, which generally in PvE is all you care about, is how much output you can get. But this one over here, though, this is definitely a good one for PvP. The duration of incoming interrupts, snares, and root effects are reduced by 25%. Now, as a druid, you don't care about snares and roots so much, right? Maybe it's a little bit helpful if a slow is slightly shorter and then you don't have to use a shapeshift global cooldown. But interrupts, you're going to be casting a lot as a Balance Druid with the new Eclipse system, which I've gone over in previous videos if you want to check them out. You're going to be casting Wrath to get into Lunar Eclipse, and you're going to be casting Starfire a lot when you're in Lunar and to get back to Solar. Generally speaking, I believe you're going to be casting a lot more in Shadowlands. So if that remains true when the expansion launches, getting 25% less time interrupted is going to be a great added bonus. So this is great for teams that want to focus on stopping your Cyclones. They want to make it difficult for you to get damage output, so you get more crowd control and you get less interrupt time. So it's great for PvP. And the nice part about this Covenant is that if you wanted to flip this back and get some benefits from the Well-Fed and the Flask, maybe for your raid or something, you could go down that tree. So I can see Venthyr working now for both PvE and PvP a bit more. Here on the right side, we've got the Dauntless Duelist. The first enemy you damage in combat is marked as your adversary. This is generally not that great of a mechanic in PvP, especially rated PvP, because once you've killed a target, the game is usually over. You're not switching to another one. You deal 4% more damage to them, and they deal 2% less damage to you. You may only have one adversary at a time. Oh, so this is a little bit better than I first expected. You deal 4, so it's just basically 4% extra damage against the first enemy you attack, and 2% less damage that they deal back to you. So you're going to want to be very careful about who you attack first, and you could get a little bit of extra damage. I still think you get more value out of the interrupt reduction overall. You're going to get more damage on more targets, basically, by being interrupted 25% less than you are going to be getting 4% more damage against one target. And I can imagine in dungeons and raids that having this overall of benefit and effect is likely stronger, at least on trash. Maybe for long boss fights, the Dauntless Duelist is going to be your pick, right? So in a raid scenario where you do just want 4% more damage against a boss that you're hitting the entire time for maybe 10 minutes straight. So this is a little bit of a tiered window of, this is good all around for PvE, not so much PvP. This is just solid overall in PvP, and this seems to be more focused around bosses. And I don't see you getting that much of a benefit in ranked or PvP or even unranked PvP as opposed to just being interrupted less, having more quality of life. Now the final tier here for Nadja is going to be the Thrill Seeker. While in combat, you gain a stack of Thrill Seeker every 2 seconds, or at 4 stacks on killing an enemy. At 40 stacks, Thrill Seeker is consumed to grant Euphoria, speeding up everything you do by 20% for 10 seconds. Thrill Seeker decays rapidly while you are not in combat. This seems pretty good. I mean, just overall, once you get to 40 stacks, it's very similar to some of the essences that we saw in Battle for Azeroth, but rather than being focused around crit, like I believe it was, this is more around haste. So just speeding up everything you do by 20% is a little bit weird phrasing for that. That sounds like 20% haste overall. So every 2 seconds, you'll get a stack. So how long is the math on that? Oh God, I'm asked to do live math on a video here, and I'm doing this in one take. So you got 1 stack at 2 seconds, which means 30 stacks is going to be, or 30 seconds is going to be 15 stacks. So it's going to be a little bit over a minute, but you'll get a massive bonus. And then if you lined up the Thrill Seeker with your Ravenous Frenzy, so you're maxed out with Ravenous Frenzy and Incarnation, you are a ballistic boomkin. You're going to be going absolutely bonkers. You're going to be interrupted less. You're going to be getting some extra crowd control. This seems like a really deadly tier for Balance Druid overall in terms of performance with regards to offense. It's a very impressive talent tree, to say the least. But let's go and check out the other ones just to make sure that there isn't anything else here lurking in the shadows. We got Theotar the Mad Duke, and on the top tier we've got Door Shadows, frees you from roots and snares. Again, you're a druid, you already free yourself from roots and snares. You can pretty much ignore it. Leisurely Gate, this is going to be the Door of Shadows is instant cast, but its cooldown is 30 seconds, increased to 30 seconds. This is what I was trying just for fun, just to basically be blinking around, but it makes it a 2-minute cooldown. It's not nearly as effective in that regard, but this could be another choice of where you're picking based on the conduit. Perhaps the Covenant effect isn't nearly as potent as what these conduits could be when they're created, so take that into consideration. Now moving on to the next tier, we've got Refined Palate. This is a passive. The effects of combat potions last 20% to 100% longer. So in Mythic Plus or raids where you're going for like a pre-pot, this is going to be really good. In PvP, you would benefit from the saltwater potions for random battlegrounds if you wanted to get some extra boost from that, but it's kind of meh, right, for PvP. It's very similar to this tier, right? Except now with potions rather than the well-fed buffs. The Soothing Shade, your spells and abilities have a chance to call Tubbins and Gubbins to your side for 12 seconds. Parasol in hand, standing in the shaded area grants you 10% mastery. Generally, mechanics like this are very difficult to utilize in PvP because they basically force you to stun yourself, stand in one place, and then the enemy team can do what they want with you. These mechanics are usually very difficult, and unless it's a massive benefit, it's not worth it. If you remember from my Night Fae video, you basically just get 10% mastery every time you cast the Covenant ability. That's a lot less restricted than something like this where you're forced to stand in one spot. And again, you don't really have control of it. It's random. Your spells and abilities have a chance. It's not at 5 casts you're going to call them in and then you know where they're going. So it's a little bit awkward to use overall, I would say. Token of Appreciation grants a shield that absorbs 537 damage to allies who aid you with healing or beneficial magic effects. You will only shield each ally once every 20 seconds. So if you're being healed, you will heal the healer back. I mean, in PvP it makes sense. It's just a heal. So you've got something that's not really benefiting you if you're a PvP player. If you're PvE, this is pretty much auto lock. You're gonna go for that one. This one's a bit difficult to use, I would say, in every scenario of the game, just PvE and PvP, but it is just more damage. So none of these options give damage other than this one, even though it's awkward. And then this one is just kind of, yeah, it's a little bit of a shield every 20 seconds. It's not nearly as strong as the Necrolord one, where you dip below 50% health and you get a 10% shield on yourself. It's a lot less controlled in that sense. It's not going to be countering nearly as much. So it's this talent tree so far looking a bit less impressive than the first one. Again, the conduits we don't have information on just yet. And then down here we've got life of the party. During the Ember Court, your guests gain additional happiness for each event completed. When the court concludes, the effects of any decrease. So this is likely just some bonus fun stuff. Free transmog. I spend a lot of money on that, so I mean maybe I maybe I need this talent tree just to save me some gold. But the last one, exquisite ingredients. Theater will send you an assortment of flavorful herbs when you complete activities that contribute to Great Vault. So there's a lot of this to the Great Vault stuff that I'm seeing throughout all the covenants, and this one focuses more on herbalism. So if you're an herbalist or you care about that as a profession, then this is going to be the covenant that gives you a little bit of a bonus towards that. And then the final trait we do not have just yet available for Theater the Mad Duke, but unless it's absolutely insane, other than being a combat potion user in the Mythic Plus dungeon, if that ends up being the most throughput for you, this talent tree is very lackluster in PvP, I would say overall, and somewhat in PvE as well, unless this final one is absolutely crazy. We'll have to get back to it. But for the third talent tree and the final one of the Venthyr, we've got General Draven. Anima Infusion. Earning Anima improves your armor's remaining durability, just saving some gold. Expedition Leader. Leaving a resting area increases your mount speed by 10% and your out of combat regeneration by 100% last 10 minutes. I can imagine that this doesn't go with you into battlegrounds and arenas. It's likely cleansed off, so you're not going to get this benefit in a PvP scenario. But it would save you a lot of downtime initially for just getting your world quests done and getting them out of the way. If you're kind of just a world quest player or a world PvPer, this one does seem pretty valuable. Now, we just got a conduit slot. We'll move down to the next row. We've got built for war. While you're above 80% health, you gain 1% intellect every 30 seconds. That can get up to 5 times. But if you dip below 50% health, this effect is lost. So you're just going to get straight up extra 5% intellect. And if you're not the target, you'll keep that for most of the time. In PvE, as long as you're avoiding mechanics, you should generally have this with good uptime, unless there's something you can't avoid that does do massive damage, which it doesn't happen too frequently, maybe once or twice, and you can avoid taking this in those dungeons specifically that have those mechanics. So this is just some flat out damage. Superior Tactics. Successfully interrupting an enemy or dispelling an ally increases your critical strike chance by 10%. You don't have a really good way. I guess you could dispel, like, this could be like a Curse of Agony type of gameplay, right? So against warlocks, you would be dispelling curses. Rogues, you'd be dispelling poisons. And you would get 10% crit for 10 seconds. The fact that it has Dispel included with Interrupting does make it more viable for Balance Druid. But in PvP, you don't really care about crit too much. In PvE, this does seem like it would be really good to get the 10% crit, but they're not always times to dispel things. You're generally limited to whatever the dungeon is. So if you know the dungeon has a lot of trash that poisons targets, and you can dispel them frequently to get 10% crit, this could be valuable. But that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of thinking you got to do, and that's a lot of restrictions to get 10% crit. I could just get 5% int for standing still. Kind of a little bit better there, I think, for the built for war. But we've got one more. Hold your ground. Standing still for at least 4 seconds grants you 10% increased stamina and 4% increased healing. Done. This effect persists for 4 seconds after you start moving. So if you're a healer, if you're going to be flipping between a Resto Druid, you're going to be given some options here to get a little bit of extra stamina and extra healing output, but it's very minor. Maybe even the 5% int is likely better depending on the compositions you're playing. If you're playing with if you plan to play with spellcasters like mages, warlocks, and shadow priests, as a healer, you generally don't get targeted healing those classes because there's just way more higher priorities that the other teams need to deal with, like Chaos Bolts, Polymorphs, Greater Pyros, and Vampiric Touches. So you can get away with effects like this when you heal spellcasters, but because you won't be the target, you'll get the, sorry, I should be talking about the intellect. You'll get the benefit of this intellect because you won't be the target. Now, if you're playing with melee classes as a healer, so your warriors, your death knights, and your demon hunters, the healer actually does become the target more frequently. So you may want 10% more stamina. You could choose to stand still, wait for this, and then benefit with a frenzied regeneration. This is now as Balance Druid, so you get a 10% in healing increase on your frenzied regen. But I've been playing Guardian Affinity a lot less. That could change with ranked 3v3. But if you're not running Guardian Affinity, then you're only benefiting from Ysera's Gift to have 10% stamina. It seems like you would just generally be going for 5% int in almost all scenarios based on this tier of General Draven. We've got more conduits that haven't been created yet to move through. And now we've got Enduring Gloom. Door of Shadows grants you a shield that absorbs damage equal to 15% of your maximum health and it lasts 8 seconds. So a slightly worse version in terms of health of the Necro Lord's Fleshcraft. You just get a shield on top of it. You don't get the instant cast effect because that's on the other tree. So you're only going to get a shield every minute and a half. It does make it better for defense purposes. So if you're going to be using the Door of Shadows and your main intention is to run away rather than engage with crowd control, getting a bit of an extra shield could be a good benefit as a Balance Druid. And I do enjoy just running around on the map at the moment with Typhoon coming back baseline. So playing Wild Charge and Typhoon, Ursul's Vortex, maybe perhaps getting in the Door of Shadows for some extra movement and just trying to avoid the enemy team when I'm the target and just generally being an annoyance. This is going to help me out. In PvE, it's not a big deal. You've already got a lot of ways to move out of mechanics as a druid, so using the Door of Shadows may actually be more inconvenient than using what's available in your class kit. So this benefit's not going to really matter to you too much in PvE. Move as one, passive. When a nearby ally gains temporary increased movement speed, you also gain the benefit up to 30%. You're not going to be near anyone usually in PvP, and I would imagine as PvE as well, unless there's a mechanic where you're deliberately stacked up. But if you're stacked up, generally those mechanics have you standing still, not moving too much. So, and again, movement speed, never a big issue for a Balance Druid. So if I was picking these based on only the Covenant traits, then yeah, just getting a shield on your teleport is going to be a bit better than this. But this selection could be determined just by conduits rather than the actual Covenant spell themselves. Take that into account when these conduits are available, and I'll be doing a conduit review when they have been created. Call to action. Ravenous Frenzy grants 10% versatility and 4% versatility for up to 4 nearby allies. Doesn't say the range on this. Is it 5 yards? Is it 10 yards? 20? 40? Like, what is a nearby ally? I would imagine somewhere between 5 and 10. Again, you're not usually around people, but 10% versatility for yourself is great. Versatility at the moment in PvP for a Balance Druid is your best stat. So in PvP it seems solid, but in PvE crit is your best stat. Although I'm sure that this wouldn't be the worst. It seems like there would be better scaling with the Thrill Seeker. So far I'm basically sold that Nadja Mistblade is just the best overall. You could respec it, get some benefits for dungeons or for raids. You get huge benefits with interrupt reductions and extra crowd control. And then you get this massive kind of nuke during the end here, which you could line up with your Ravenous Frenzy and you could line up with your Incarnation. It's kind of the one-hit wonder. The other two, in terms of a Balance Druid specifically, seem to be pretty just meh and average. There's nothing just standing out to me that's making me think that my gameplay's changing or there's anything too ridiculous. It seems like there's a lot of things that are a little bit more awkward to use, if anything. Perhaps that changes throughout the beta, but right now as a Balance Druid player all around, if you're just doing random battlegrounds or you're just doing PvE or you're doing a little bit of everything, seems to me like Nadja Mistblade is going to be your go-to for the Balance Druid. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I'm going to be going over the last covenant, the Kyrians, in the next one, which also has some pretty sick benefits for PvP, so you want to stick out for that one. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.